Welcome. It's Tuesday again. Obviously, that's why we're online. So we're going to start today with a lot of editing. Actually, last week, for those of you that didn't watch it, we did a lot of deep dive into match look, the latest tool from Capture One, latest version of Capture One. We'll talk about that very briefly. But today we're going to spend a lot more time editing pictures, which is what you're here for, rather than looking at that particular feature. We might touch on it in terms of whether it can be useful, but we're going to try and ramp through quite a lot. We've got a bit of a backlog of some of your raw files. So today, as I say, we're going to be using that program, Capture One. So for those of you that don't know what that is, it's an editing program that allows us to take the raw file from a camera, process it into a way that reminds us more of what we saw, because sometimes what the camera recorded isn't necessarily what we remember from the scene. It does allow us to fix things. It does allow us to correct things. We'll talk about that today. But most importantly, it allows us to get our pictures out in a way that is pleasing, which is the goal. Before we go much further, though, can't avoid it today. Big day, huge day, big repercussions. Would try and avoid it, but it's very divisive. Turnout's going to be massive. That's right. It is the Chipping Sodbury Bonfire Night celebration. So for those of you in the area, I don't even know where it is, but at 6 o'clock there's big fireworks going on. But apparently they're low noise. Look at that. Low noise. That'll fix all the divisions in the world. Anyway, for everyone that is not interested in that, let's get back to Capture One. Capture One is currently on version 16.5. There was a big change a little while ago to try and remove the yearly based versioning and so on. And actually, this is testament to it. So if you think about it, for the first time, version 16 was done in 2023. So it would have been Capture One 23. Typically, Capture One 24 or 25, sorry, Capture One 24? Ugh, getting confused now, that's the point. Typically, the next version would have been 17, but actually this year's release is 16.5. That one, there. So Capture One are not focusing as much on the big headline. You'll notice the application name has changed. It's now just Capture One. There's no version number in the application name, and that's because they're moving to a more, let's call it regular style of update. Minor updates followed by big ones over time, but they're trying to get people into this mode of it's just Capture One. So in order to find out your version, you go to the Capture One menu or Help About in Windows. Go to the About screen and you'll see the version. If it says 16.5, you are on the latest version. There's no 0.5.1 yet or any service release. That's still brand new. But if you're on an older version, it doesn't mean you have to be on this version. So in 16.5, there were a few things. So match look is one of them. Look at last week's. We're not going to go over that again. Don't worry. AI people masking is another. There's some tethering stuff in there. What else was there? There's some other stuff in there I'm missing. Complete mind blank. But there's a few things in there that are very useful to some people and a few things that people are questioning whether they're useful. That's your choice. So if you find the tools useful, it's worth upgrading. If not, you don't necessarily have to. If you subscribe, that's what you're paying for. Don't ever use the phrase, it's a free upgrade to subscribers. And it's not free, you've paid for it. So if you want it, use it. If you're on a perpetual license and a version of 16.4 or prior, you need to pay to upgrade into 16.5. There was a tiny little grace period during the beta program, where if you bought 16.4, Capture One were allowing you to switch over to 16.5 at no cost. If you think you fall in that category, just reach out to support and they can have a chat. For those of you that don't know how to get files into this show program thingy box, this here, that. Go there, upload your raw files, whether it's an EIP out of Capture One with your edits in it, or if it's the raw file from the camera. Include your name, no play, but also include if you've got any issues, if you've tried editing and what's gone wrong, if you've tried editing what's gone well, so we can try and play online. And in the meantime, between these sessions, you can obviously carry on in that thing, that chat up there. You can search for it on Facebook and you'll find people discussing things, sometimes heated, sometimes not. It's quite cool. So all that said, let's get back to actual Capture One. Let's load up the Capture One interface. There we are, pretty much where we left off last week with Matchlook. One thing I forgot to mention last week, and I got mentioned it. I got mentioned it. I don't know what English that is. On the way out was about a little tick box here, light and contrast. If you are playing with palettes, which we have been quite extensively, so my reference image, rather than using another image, we've been using palettes to just play with how it tweaks the colors. So let's say I wanted to apply that palette to, oh, this could go wrong. That one. Hit apply. It is, I always untick normalize because I don't want Capture One to play with the exposure and the white balance. I want it to just leave that as it were and just use color balancing instead and color grading. But light and contrast also has an effect on the amount of change to that image. So if you think about it, taking, let's just go to here, this image here, and trying to match the light and contrast. Oh, where's my reference? Oh, there we are, sorry. Trying to match this in terms of light and contrast. So in other words, what's the average in this image? It's probably about middle grey. Forget the color. Just think of the bright to the dark. Well, this is white to pretty much black. So what's the image overall got to be? It's got to be middle grey. So when you leave light and contrast ticked, you're going to get middle grey. In other words, it's going to fade everything out. If you disable light and contrast, I'm just going to reset the image as well. So that's the original image. Hit apply. It's going to apply the palette, but it's not going to change my luma curve. It's not going to change my output in terms of the brights and the darks. It's going to apply that palette to a certain extent, but it's going to leave everything else alone. Where that becomes really important, let's go to, not that one, let's pick on this one. So let's say I've got a flatter palette like this one. Load that into my match look. If I leave light and contrast on, I'm going to get a very flat image. Why? Because my reference here, my reference for match look is very flat. If you look at the tones in here, they're pretty much all around the same. You can see that from, well, sorry, my new histogram there, but if I go to this one, look at this histogram here. It's all bunched up there. And look what match look has done to the output. It's pretty much bunched it up there. If I disable light and contrast using the same reference image and hit apply, it will apply the color tones. Whether or not this is right in this image, don't do this with this sort of image, but you get the point. It does apply the color tones, but it's not applying that crunching of the light and contrast. So the HDR, the luma curve, all of that stuff that's changing brightness and darkness isn't applied. So all up to you how you use it. If you use it, you don't have to use it. Francois mentioned last week sort of the anti, I guess, view, which is if I want every landscape to be unique and have its own specific style and reflect what I was there seeing at that particular time, then match look is the opposite of what you need, because it's gonna match that to an original look taken at another time or taken from another place. But if you are producing stuff commercially or it has to match or out of several cameras, it can be handy. Raymo, in answer to your question, the cinnamon Diet Coke or cinnamon Coke Zero is revolting. Don't do that. Stay in your lane, Coke. Honestly. Anyway, so pictures. Last week we stopped at this shot from Jed, and I rather abruptly did a quick custom style. So styles are still there. You can still get them. You can still download them. We still have Elevation as a style pack, which we produce. So I'm going to apply what we call Blockbuster, which is basically teal and orange. And you've got 4 different options in there. The default, the highlights, protection, so highlights down, shadows up, or maximum range, which is both bringing the highlights down and bringing the shadows up. If I want to keep the sort of glow in here, I don't want to be protecting the highlights. I also don't really want to be bringing up too much of the shadows, so I'm just going to go with default. So let's apply that. Blockbuster on there. Now I've got a styled image. I quite like that, but it doesn't feel finished. So let me just reset this one to the original. And the reason it doesn't feel finished to me, and maybe this is just a personal thing, is this Keystone. I don't like it. I get it. It's expected. It's 28mm lens, so you're going to have some fall off, and obviously it's not quite at the same angle, so you're not flat on with a nice, let's say 40 or 50mm lens further away. You've got a wide lens. You've got some perspective fall off as things start to converge as they get further away from you, and I want to fix that. And we keep forgetting that we've still got the good old tools, all the magical things, AI brush and match look and whatever. Sometimes the bit that makes the photo is the old tools. So Keystone. We have Auto Keystone, have done for a few versions now. Let's hit that. So to a lot of us, we look at it and think, that's done it, right? It's Auto Keystone. So we're done. But it's not quite done, is it? Because we only left it on this one, the default, and I see this quite a lot. A lot of people will leave the tools on the default, and the default for Keystone is to just do the verticals. So if I just reset my Keystone, we've got two issues with this. One, let's just put some guides on, actually, that'll help. So number one, we have a bit of fall off here vertically, and the reason being the building's going up, so it goes away from us in perspective terms. So what's here, level, isn't here up at the top, and the same down here, although you can't quite see it because there's almost like a virtual line, but if I drew here to this pillar, you'd see that it's going in again on the right. But it's also going in horizontally. So my line here on the top of the roof disappears down the further it goes. This line here, because it's in the middle of the lens, is probably about right. But this one here, also a little bit wrong. So you don't have to stick with the Auto Keystone being this two-way, or the verticals, or the horizontals. You can ask it to do all four ways as Auto. Click on that, and it's done a pretty good job. And it's one of the things, the Auto Keystone tool, sometimes I'll still play with it a little bit, we'll still alter it. But most of the time it's getting stuff right. And it's picking on stuff. I wouldn't be able to virtually work out where this point needs to be, because I've got to draw a sort of mental line from this part of the gas pumps all the way down from this part of that pillar. Auto's done it for me. It's done a good job. Now, when you do Keystone, you might find there's a couple of weird bits, like this light isn't perfectly correct. You can't fix that with Keystone. So there's a limit. If we were further back with a zoom lens, or a zoom lens with a longer lens, these lights would be more head on. You wouldn't have this sort of upward feel to this light. We wouldn't see more up into it. It would be identical to this one. You wouldn't have the slightly misshapen lampshade. But with an auto, or with a Keystone function of a wide lens, this is probably the best you're going to get. Now, the other thing with it, if I look at this shape here, the original, through to this shape here, you notice what's happened is it's squashed, right? It's got a little bit flatter. So remember as well, in your Keystone, you've also got sliders. Use this tool as well. And in here, you've got aspect, and aspect controls effectively how much squashing you're doing that way or that way. So as I move my aspect slider, I can make it more wide, but more importantly, in this case, I can make it a little less wide. I can make it less squashed. So am I going to make a tiny amount of change, maybe -1? That sort of works. And I'm keeping the reference above, because what I'm looking for is, have I kept these things in rough similar aspect? And I think I have at that point. I can now go into a crop, so I can keep my crop as the original. And at this point, we can then play with where do we want this to sit. Because it's a Keystone correction, we're going to have some limits in terms of where it can actually go to. Let me just switch this to here so we can see this a bit easier. So we can see that Keystone has changed. It's manipulated the shape of the shot to pull out and allow us all of the space and the pulling. But the problem is we obviously lose the ability to crop up and into here. If you do want to fill some of this in later on in a pixel editor, under your crop, allow this one, crop outside of image. And that would allow us to pull this crop up here. Because to me, I'd want to keep this cable, if we are keeping the cable, life's about choices. But if we are keeping the cable, I'd want to keep that cable leading in from the left-hand side. And I'd kind of want to make the point of having maybe these gas pumps in the center somehow, with this sort of negative space over to the side here. Switch that back to black so I get the effect. Remember that this isn't true because we've actually got a huge, let me just put the crop back up. Let's go to light so we can see it. You can see my crop marks here. If I were to export this image, I'm going to have a great big black triangle there, great big black triangle there. I'd have to fill that in with something, not Capture One. Capture One only deals within the canvas. So in this case, you've got a need, if you want to do this, to go to a pixel editor. If you don't want to do that, then keep the crop within. It's perfectly fine. And actually, if you were going to do that, what are we at? Is it a 2x1 at the moment? Yeah, roughly. So, maybe you go to a 3x4, or sorry, 2x3 it was before. Maybe we go into there, like that. Again, I'm using, so if we're going to keep the cable in, big decision, but if we are there, and at this time with 3x4, I can kind of center the gas station itself. So we get to there. I'm just going to switch to black for aesthetic reasons, but no others. Now, what else to do with it? Not a lot, to be honest. I'm pretty comfortable with this. To some points here, so actually, Jed, there you go. So he did a Keystone one, but he didn't send it to me, Jed. But it's actually good because it's pointed out what we can do with it. Let me just come back out from 33% to maybe... Ooh, you're being annoying there. Let's go to... Ooh, I've got to stick with that. What I can do is force it to go there. There we go. So to, where are we? Jim's point, lamppost doesn't match the window. So this one here is nothing to do with Keystone. So if you're talking about this bit, so it leans further away from this line here than, oops, wrong tool, H for hand. So here we're closer, here we're further away. That's not Keystone. That's just the lamppost isn't level. I think Tim's picked up on it there. Yeah, I don't think the lampstone or the lamppost is straight. And if we go back to the original, we can see in here as well, there's a little bit of a lean on it, which isn't part of Keystone. It's just part of it. But if I look at these two images side by side, let's just go. Weird. This one just looks more finished, more polished. If I wanted to lighten it up a little bit, we can do. We've got, if I put my exposure warning on, obviously these are going to be overexposed. I get that. We might want to pull back a little bit of white in the HDR slider just to be able to see a bit more within those overexposed bits. There's decent dynamic range in this shot, so it can recover quite a lot. Certainly if I look at this bit here and let that white recovery there and go back to how it was, we can see the difference in there pretty strongly. So some white recovery, and remember that's the very top of the histogram. It's this bit. Highlights is this chunk, whites is this bit. So that gets that back a little bit. We have got some room here in the shadows. If I did lift the shadows up, just do it very carefully. In fact, I wouldn't do that. What I'd do is lift brightness, which isn't going to force those bits to clip again that I've just recovered. And actually on here, I actually think it needs something else, which is a little gradient. Why are you not working? Thank you. And I'm just going to draw that gradient. Now look at, here's a fun one. Look at the shape. I don't know if you've got sharp enough view on this on YouTube. You notice this gradient that should be a square gradient or a rectangular gradient. So all those lines should be parallel, right? But they're not. You notice they're going tighter on the right-hand side and further away on the left-hand side. Why? The reason is that the gradient tool is following the original shape of the image. And because in our image we've twisted it, so it's gone like that, the gradient tool is following that shape as well. So that's why the gradient tool looks a little bit odd, because of the Keystone tool having already been used. But what it does mean is we can then use our exposure and just pull that in. I'm just going to stretch this a little bit further up, just so I've got a nice sort of lead in there. Without that, it just feels very stark out here. With that, we've got a nice little glow, and then ultimately you could play the same game with the edges, but instead let's just put a tiny little bit of a vignette, a classic sort of vignette across the edges there. That would allow me, in this case, for this gas pump here, maybe I use the AI brush and choose that one. I'm going to refine the mask, so add a little bit of softening at the edges. And with the gas pump only, and that's the thing, remember, I don't want to pull up all the shadows in the image, but the gas pump only, I can pull that up, and that just gives us a little bit more of a subject and a glow. Could do the same on this one, that's personal choice. But if I go from there, out of camera, to there, this just feels so much more polished, to my mind. It's your call otherwise. Where are we? Yeah, more balanced. So, oh, David, I think you can now fill outside of the image area in Capture One. Tried it recently on a panorama and it worked. Interesting. Let's give it a go. Let's go to light and let's just create a clone of this one. Go to my crop and I'm going to crop outside of the image. There we go. Let's get a clone tool. So our little stamp. I'm going to choose here as a source. No. Nope. Can't do it. Can't do it, mate. I'm trying. No. I can clone down here, but not up there. So I don't know how that worked, David, but send it in. We'll have a look, but I'm not sure that's the case. Interestingly, for those of you as well, just a public information announcement. You notice I changed my background to be light. The reason being, in fact, what you can do is change it to be white. If you're printing, a lot of people don't necessarily want to or care about printing. If you're printing, it is pointless editing against a black background because your image isn't going to be necessarily backlit and it's not going to be glowing like it does on a screen. You need to see it on a white background so that you can see whether the whites are truly up there. In this case, they are. Obviously, you can see that from the histogram. But most people, when they print, they tend to see that the result comes out dark. The reason is a couple of things. Number one, they work in a room that is light controlled, but maybe too dark. So you think that the image is brighter than it is. Number two, they're working on a background which is not white, and paper is, generally speaking, white. Obviously, you can print whatever color pink paper you want. It doesn't matter. But typically, you're going to print on white paper, so use that as your reference. The other thing to bear in mind, while that lot behind me is hiding and distracting you from the mess in my office, YouTube lights are not helpful for editing. You're going to get reflections on your screen. You're going to get a color cast in the light in your room. So think about the setup in your room when it comes to proofing and editing. We get all tied up in this finickiness of color calibration and spiders and making sure that our screens are spot on to what our printer exports. And then we come in, turn a 60-watt equivalent light bulb on with sunlight out the window and blue lights behind us, and we think that that's a great editing environment. Worry about the big stuff. Don't worry about the little bits. And your environment is as important as anything else. Why do I edit this with black on here? Frankly, because you're all watching this on the screen and it tends to look a bit nicer. But no, you shouldn't really. Prasad, interesting observation on linear gradient mask. Yeah, so bear in mind your linears are always going to follow the shape of the image, the raw image. So if you start twisting that shape using Keystone, the linear mask is actually going to follow it, and it's a good thing. Don't get me wrong; it's designed to do it. But yeah, there we go, Tim. So just tested it with a recent Pano, and it works with a Panorama. Interesting. Luckily, we need to come back to the Panorama. So let's just do that now, because there was another question on panoramas which we're going to cover now. So if there are no other questions on this one, we can move on. There we go. So let's go back to Paul's panoramic shot that didn't work last week. Someone asked the question, which was, to quote, I thought that any changes, so rewind, sorry. In this shot, you've got a polarizer in use, and that polarizer is giving you an uneven sky, which means that when you stitch it, you get an uneven sky. This isn't a case of light fall off being an issue, which is typically what the problem is. So if you allow the vignetting of your lens to stitch, you'll get this sort of bubbly effect as it joins, especially in blue skies. This is about the fact that the polarizer is getting different light at different angles. As if I look at this versus here, we can see, look, this is the top left, we've got the dark area, this is all across the middle, and it's based on where the sun is in relation to the polarizer. The question was that I made some changes to that to get rid of this deviation in the sky, but we thought that in panoramic stitching it removed all of that and it just went back to basics. In HDR, when you do a merge to HDR, it cares less about the changes you've made, but in Panorama, it does accept the changes you put in. So the easy way to demonstrate that, let me take this image here and let's pick on our color editor. And let's make every single blue, let's go to advanced, every single blue to be pink. I'm going to copy that change, paste it onto all of these. Okay. So now if I go to my, oops, let's just make sure you can see the menu. If I go to my Stitch to Panorama, a second, and hit Stitch, what do I get when it returns? Is a purple one. The purple one. So yes, the panoramic stitching does factor in changes, certainly those that are made on the image layer, and it will adapt to them. So in the case of what we were trying to show last week, let's just reset those. In the case of here, we use the skin tone tool, which should also be called the sky tool for landscape people. And we took everything that was sort of blue-ish, and we said we want to, let's just saturate it a little bit more, uniform out the hue, uniform out the saturation, uniform out the lightness. So we're basically flattening. So if I were to just undo that, we see there's a big difference there, not so much here. It is affecting other stuff. Normally we'd mask that out. There's lots of ways of doing this properly, but I just want you to see the difference. So I'm copying those adjustments with Command, Shift, and C, or we can just copy and apply up here. And pasting all those down there, we still have some bubbling because of the use of a polarizer, and that's the problem. But when I stitch it to a panorama, forgetting the issue at the of everything being hit at the bottom, because we've unfortunately that blue cone includes the water, for example. But what we get is a slightly, so this is the new version, this is the previous version. As I say, forget the color, I'm just demonstrating the fact that it does factor in the changes you make. It's slightly better, certainly in this area here, it's a lot better than here, but it's not perfect. And the reason is because we can't go back and take off that polarizer. Now, to David and Tim's point, let's try. So on my new panorama here, oh, that was a TIFF, sorry. Let's go on to the DNG. Let's take a stamp tool and let's take from there as a source. And it does indeed fill in the extra area. There we go. You heard it here second, boys and girls. Not first, because Tim and David got there first. But yes, on a panorama, you can now fill in the extra gaps. Wonder when that was introduced. Maybe it's been there the whole time. I don't think it has. Anyway, that's awful what I've just done to Paul's image, but it does demonstrate it. So yes, cool. Right, but unfortunately, that only works on a panorama, which is great for panoramas, but it doesn't work on a normal crop. Sorry. Okay, fun one. Simon's wires. So Simon took this picture. It's a very old tree. Obviously, I can't remember the full story he sent in, but it's an old tree. It's older than me, certainly. And didn't realize, I think, until after taking it that there are these pesky wires across the way. Now, can Capture One get rid of them? Well, here's my AI brush. And you know, with AI, you can zoom in and in and in. And the closer you get, the more accurate AI is going to be. Except here, it can't really see that cable. It can sort of get to there. Let's just zoom out a little bit. What did it choose? It chose 2 little bits of cable. Not great. So instead, maybe let's try a healing brush, right? So let's just go from there as a source. Make it very, very small. using the square bracket. The left square bracket makes the brush smaller, right square bracket makes it longer. And let's just zoom in so we're doing this correctly. In fact, sorry, should have done that before. So let's delete that layer, create a new healing brush layer, and I'm gonna, weird that my cursor doesn't show me my, it does a little bit. So I'm gonna make a very small brush, make it quite hard on the edges. Let's go to about there. I'm going to choose there as a source using the Option key or the Alt key. Click there to start. Now I want a straight line, right? That's very difficult to draw. Or you can hold down the Shift key in Capture One. Hold down the Shift key, click where you want it to end. You have a straight line. Done. Now, what has it done? Done an okay job, but it's not great, is it? And then let's look over here. So this tree bark over here. Well, I mean, what am I going to take from? So, I could take a little bit of that and paste that in there. That starts to look a bit fake. I could take a little bit of that, a little bit of that. This is going to take me a long time, and it's just not going to look right, I would say. Yes, it is possible to do all this in Capture One, but my God, you're going to be here a long while, and you're probably going to see the result. So, in a departure from normal, wonderful running, we're going to go into Photoshop. Because very recently, Photoshop launched a new thing called distraction removal. And while I'm not convinced on its perfection, it does a pretty good job. So here's our shot. It's the TIFF exported straight out of Capture One. Let's go to our healing tool and we choose the remove tool. So under the remove tool now in Photoshop, you'll find a button that says find distractions. And you've got mode, so you can have generative AI on or off. And this is very important. So if you're using generative AI, you might find that you're excluded from entering this into competitions. You might find there are some copyright challenges. You might find that it does some weird things. So if you want it to use your own image as the base source, you can turn AI off, generative AI off. Find distractions. At the moment, it's only got two modes, wires and cables and people, but let's go to wires and cables. And let's see what it does. It takes it a little while because it's got to do two things. It's got to find the wires first. It's then got to fill them in with whatever it finds, and it's got to find the sources for it. But you saw that probably took, I don't know, 5 or 6 seconds for me to say that. Before, after. Before, after. Now, is it perfect? I would say no. So let's look here. So look at this branch here in particular. Before, you see this branch was going to the left. Now, it's done a weird thing there. Where else are we? Up here. So look at this branch here. And the new one, it's straightened the branch. It's got rid of the little knotty bit. Obviously, you can erase bits out of the layer. But this is where it's just all down to you. It's your decision. But if you need your images to be 100% accurate, I would argue you wouldn't be removing the wires and cables in the first place. If you're happy for a little bit of artistic license, this has just done that in 4 or 5 seconds. It would take probably an hour or two to do it well in a raw editor, any raw editor for that matter, to do it really well on a manual healing basis. So to me, it's about using the right tool for the right occasion. Removing those wires, I can do it manually for sure, but honestly, Simon, I'd think twice about it doing it in a pixel editor, especially one that's this complex. If it was just Sky, then sure, why bother? Let me just get rid of our battle border. It's starting to annoy me. If it was just Sky, I'd say just do it with a healing brush. If it was just green grass, do it with a healing brush. But where it's a complex shape like this and tree bits and leaves and whatever else, you have a built-in tool in other applications, in pixel editors, most importantly, to do that. Now, where do you do that in the process? At the end. The reason being that the TIFF file, unfortunately, is not as editable as the raw. So what I'd be doing in here, let's just go into our basics. So I'm going to remove that heal layer, and on our base layer, I could just create a new filled layer just to get that started. Let's do, I don't know, a very, very quick grade. So let's go into our color balance. I'm going to cool down the shadows a little bit to go a bit bluer. Maybe the highlights will just warm up a little bit. Maybe we go to there. To a certain extent, we're sort of playing. I might want to do a little bit of a contrast bump like that. I might even use dehaze just to get a bit more clarity in there. And actually, speaking of clarity, a little pop in natural mode isn't going to hurt it. So we go from there to there. Small change, but it's just going to highlight the tree. Maybe I want to add a little bit of a softening or lowering of light level on the outside. So we use a vignette for that. I might want to put on a little bit of lens correction on the sharpness at the edges. And at this point, edit with, in fact, I'm going to go here, edit with Adobe Photoshop. 2025 is the version that has that in. Choose TIFF, choose 16-bit if you want the best level of color out of it. Personally, I choose uncompressed simply because it saves faster. It uses more disk space, but it saves faster than a compressed version. So that's the only reason I'd do it that way. And I will always export in Adobe RGB until something better comes along, but I haven't found it that's reliable for print. So edit those variants. It's going to load up Photoshop. There we go. Just get rid of the previous one that I did. I'm not going to save that. With the distraction removal in Photoshop, don't do it on the background layer because it literally does it on the layer that you're using and you've got no ability to go before and after. So in a way of sort of faking non-destructive, duplicate that layer. So either Command and J or drag your background layer to the little plus sign that's underneath my head, I'm afraid. Let me just move that up there so you can see it. Maybe no, because I just screwed that up and put it in the wrong place. So under my layers, let's just drag background down to here, to this little plus sign, and I get a new copy of it. Then we go into our remove tool. By default, your healing brush tool will be the default. You need to click and hold, change it to remove. Decide whether you want to use Gen AI. Personally, I would click off. Find distractions, wires and cables. And here's the beautiful part. One moment, callers. Let's remove them. I would check whether you're happy with the removal. Don't just take its word for it. And remember, because you created it on a new layer, you can undo and do. If I now am happy with it, let's just merge those layers. Let's go to save. So file, save. If I go back into Capture One, there is my TIFF. Nicely round tripped, as we referred to it. So if you do the editing in Capture One to start with, edit with, and then your pixel editor, whether it's Photoshop, Affinity, whatever, Pixelmator, anything that you want to use, and save it in the third-party application. Capture One knows about it and will automatically put it into your catalog here. So I've got with wires and without wires. That's it. So hopefully, I mean, Simon, your answer or your question was, can I do this in Capture One? You can. I wouldn't. You know, yeah. Can you eat soup with chopsticks? Probably. Would I? No. So I'd be in a place the same with this, which is use the best tool for the job. Don't get precious about it. Try and do as much as you can in the raw editor because you're editing better quality data, which is why we do this as the last step. But from here, let's be honest, you can still edit a TIFF. Your white balance change will be fixed to 5,000. You're going to have limitations on what you can pull back in your HDR sliders and stuff like that. But most other edits you're able to do. You can still use a style brush. We can go into, let's go to deep sky and paint that in. I can still do all this stuff. Let's just clear that one. What happens if I fill the whole thing with deep sky? Interesting. Way overdone. But anyway, you get the point. We can still do everything that you wanted to do in Capture One after, but you're going to get a better result if you do as much as you can earlier and then use Photoshop or Affinity or whatever else to do your pixel editing later on. There you go. See, we're not precious here. Not everything has to be done in Capture One. Speaking of not everything being done in Capture One, question from Bob, which was, just a disclaimer, I don't know if this is a bug in the way that the EIP was sent. It may well be. The question from Bob was, should I darken the background in my image, or is this too much? If this is the correct image, with the correct edit, then it is way too much, is the answer, if this was the original. But I have a feeling maybe there's something that's gone wrong with mask or something like that. And the background there, because wow, that hurts me. But there's a black and white conversion that's gone on here, which is, shifting all the blues to be dark, all the magentas to be dark, across the whole image. There's a mask on here, which is picking out the sticks. There's the original. I'm not sure what the goal was in here, if this was the intended output, but let's start from this one instead. So a few things. Number one, let's just test out whether Capture One is able. Let's create a new variant of that, in fact. Just move that up there. Let's see if Capture One is able to determine our subject. So let's use the subject AI detection. It's got 2 out of 5, not bad, is it? It's a starting point. Now, it didn't get all of the subject, okay? We know that. So let's use our AI brush and start clicking on other bits of subject. Don't like that it's spreading too much there. That's better. Look at the difference. So this is another thing with the AI brush. Depending on where I set my mouse, it will either get it perfectly correct or it'll spread a little bit. So like even, what was it there somewhere? Well, I found a little sweet spot somewhere where it started to spread a bit too far. Let's start with that. Let's add on that. Remember, each time I click, I'm adding to the mask. Add on that. This is where it gets tricky. And again, with AI masking, the closer you get, the more accurate it's going to be. This is going to struggle, I think, but let's see. No, it did a decent job. Let's get that bit. And that. Here's going to be a bit trickier because it's going to get too much, I think. Or not enough, ironically. So here is our mask. I'm going to turn it into grayscale. So for a grayscale mask, click on here for your mask and choose display grayscale mask, or Option M or Alt and M on Windows. And if we look on here, you see it's missing bits. So what we can do is refine mask. And this will spread it a little bit. It's not perfect, so I'm going to pull this in a bit tighter, maybe to there. I'm happy there's a little bit of spread, but I don't want it spreading too much. But now I have a pretty good subject mask on the sticks. So let's actually rename it to be sticks. If I rename it, Capture One still knows it's a subject. So if I was moving between different images, it would still try and work that through. So if we wanted to darken the background, I don't know whether darkening it helps, and I'll explain why. What's differentiating at the moment these sticks from that background? It's pretty much contrast and tone, right, and brightness. So if this stick is darker than the background, by darkening the background, I actually remove the separation. I reduce it. It goes from being very clearly separated to being a bit sort of lost. So yeah, let me create a new layer. I'm going to copy the mask from sticks, and I'm going to invert the mask. So in other words, I've now got 2 layers, one of sticks, one of the opposite of sticks. So let's call it not sticks. If on this one I pull this brightness down, you see how it's all gone mushy. It's all gone very flat. And if I was to look at the histogram, look, here we were sort of in the middle. By darkening it, but it's a big lump, you see. There's not really much contrast in there. By darkening it, all that's happened is I've moved that whole lump of the whole image down. So the whole image has got flatter, but the sticks are now almost more lost in it. They're not as obvious as they were when they were the darkest thing on the shot. So rather than darkening the background, I'd actually go the other way, to be honest, and I would shift this a little bit up. So I'd use brightness like that. I might use a little bit of shadow lift as well, because I want to affect these bits of grass here, because I want them to separate from the sticks too. Then I might do a little bit of a different crop. So I might go to maybe a 2x3 instead of a 3x4 and go to there. I could do a little funky deep sky. Let's just try what that does on. Oh yeah, okay, that's going to work. So here's a thing. If I do deep sky over the entire image, it's going to be a bit of a problem, right? Because it's also going to do it on the sticks. So here's a fun one. Here's my mask, right, for deep sky. Right click, copy mask from, not sticks. I want the sky. Go back to my image, use the AI eraser, and now we're going to erase everything that's not the sky out of my mask. Just get the grayscale back up. Any bits that remain, any residual bits, let's just make that a bit bigger and a bit harder so we can just erase like that. It doesn't have to be completely perfect, but hopefully that made sense. I did it very quickly, but logically think about it. I want deep sky on the sky. I don't want it on the sticks. I could obviously mask the sky, but I've already got a mask that's everything but the sticks. It's just it's also got everything else. So all I do is apply that same mask to my style brush layer, deep sky, and then erase the bits that I don't want in the deep sky. And I can do that with either a manual eraser or the AI eraser. I find little bits like that, and little chunks there, a little bit there, a little bit up there. There we go. And if I turn my mask off, I've now got a more dramatic sky, but I'm not affecting everything else. I want the rest of this foreground, sorry, if you keep the AI brush on, it gets very psychedelic with blues and reds. But I want my foreground to still be quite pale, quite tame, quite soft. In fact, I could go to my not sticks area and I could even warm this up a little bit here. It's also going to affect the sky, obviously, but remember I can counter that. So I can warm it up but desaturate. Now on my deep sky, I can resaturate by the same amount and cool it down. Okay. A couple of little bits of healing if I wanted to do here. So let's just create, well, I forgot my brush was tiny. Let's go back to my healing brush and just make that a little bit bigger for ease. Sand is not a problem for a healing brush. It's quite easy. And we're just gonna, I might just remove that little distracting one, and maybe this bit, and that bit, and that, just to do a little mini beach clean. Although we should be doing like proper beach cleans. You've seen them recently. Our beaches are a problem. Anyway, so before, after. To me, I think that now stands out more than if we tried to darken the background and lighten the sticks. It doesn't really make much sense. This, I'm not sure what happened here. If it was intentional, there's no such thing as a wrong answer, but this is close. Don't do that. If it was unintentional, there's a bug somewhere. We need to probably have a look at it. So if that has happened and that's not what you sent me, Bob, let me know and we'll try and work out how that happened. But if it was intended as a black and white conversion, I think this is too stark. This sort of feels pretty nice. Certainly if I do a before and after, it's relatively subtle, but it's still strong enough and bold enough. And actually the mask on our sticks and stuff is pretty decent. In fact, it's not pretty decent, it's spot on. It's left our sticks alone. Right, and actually for the little debate that's going on at the moment, Tim, so AI mask is missing bits of branches. It does that for me too. It will. The problem is that AI doesn't necessarily know it's a branch, and it will get better over time, I'm pretty sure. So as it learns more and more, you're going to see AI start to realize what we're looking at as a human. So we can draw the sort of virtual line between 2 points because we know it's a branch. AI needs to get there. So at the moment, it can miss it. It can miss the edges and the bright spots. But then to Francois's point, remember, you've still got all these other tools. So yes, we have the AI brush, but we also have the magic brush, which was great in its time and still is. It still picks on things that sometimes the AI brush misses. We also have the manual brush. And the manual brush within there, you've still got in there auto mask. So, and if you want to know auto mask and how that works, where are we? One of these that we did a while ago. Luma ranges and masking, I think it was called. So yeah, have a little look at that, because we can do a lot of this stuff without needing the AI tools, the AI brushes, the AI erasers, and so on. Good question, Susie. So black and white conversion on this. Let's go back to the Bob scenario where it was in black and white. So remember, your black and white tool applies across all of the layers. It doesn't care what layer you're on, because it's a global tool in the same way as film grain is. So we've now got a black and white layer. It doesn't, whatever layer I pick, it's the same tool. It doesn't make any difference. I can't put a black and white tool on a layer. So this being global, I don't have to remember to come off of a layer. Let's think about what we wanted to do. So the yellows, maybe I would increase in brightness. The blues up in the sky, we could decrease. I think Bob actually pulled down the magentas in his conversion, but I'm not sure what benefit that's giving us, to be honest. The cyans we can bring down, that's the sky as well. Reds would be some of that background. Let's just soften that a little bit. Oh, all right, it's Michael, not Susie. Only Susie on a Tuesday. It's fine. The conversion, I think, on this one, to be honest, because it's not in. Remember what I was saying earlier. If we were to darken the background, the only thing separating our subject from our background is a very subtle contrast change. It's not really bold enough for a black and white conversion to work. If I went to sticks now and maybe darken that down a little bit, now I'm starting to add some boldness to it. But if I'm honest, I think that's probably the safer bet over this. But yeah, to each their own. Different things for different people. But yeah, play with it. I wouldn't be in this place, but either one of these is fine. You just need to remember what is separating the subject from the background, and if you want to accentuate that separation, you need to build on that, not get rid of it. So if you've got a light background and a dark subject, you don't always have to lighten the subject. You don't always have to darken the background. It can be the other way, because you're trying to build separation. Jim, looks like snow in black and white here. Yep. Okay, Gary. In fact, Gary, I'm going to come back to you. Maybe today, maybe if not, then next week. In fact, yeah, we can do another one next week. Isn't that exciting? 3 weeks in a row. So Ken's shot here. This was Lake District. So that was the original. This is the final one. Question was, does the edit work? Is it too far? I'm going to say, so color-wise, I get it. I get what the target was. There's some decent layers in here. If I look at the masks on here, I've got separated out the mountains, separated the sky, separated the left side. We've got a top left darkening on there, and then a tiny little bump in the cloud. But to me, that's not the issue with any of this shot. The issue is it's been, to use the phrase, rescued too much. What I mean by that is, just zoom into this area here. You see these lines and these lines and these lines. So these are readout lines there. They're a form of noise. You do have them in the original. You can see them there. But by increasing saturation, by lifting up the shadows, by increasing contrast, and maybe even I think there's maybe a bit of clarity in there as well, potentially, if we go to the image layer. So look at this, saturation up 55, that's pretty big. Brightness has been lifted, increasing the shadows in there. This level, so not only have we increased brightness, we've also stretched the level. So we're really pulling all that data, the data that was in the original histogram. Here, you see it was quite compressed, it was quite central, quite middle grey. The work that's involved in pulling this to have huge amounts of contrast, and as well a curve. If I think about this compounding, so we've increased the brightness, we've lifted the shadows, we've stretched the levels, and we've put a bump in the midtones on the curve. God, that's a big lift in terms of both contrast and in terms of brightness for these elements. And I can see that by, if I go to a quick little color readout, let's click on there. Look at the shift. We've gone from 47 as a luminosity to 141. We've moved from what is a pretty dark shadow up to a smack bang in the middle of the midtones. That's a big shift in terms of how much you've brought it up in dynamic range. So the amount of f-stops, let's say, that you've increased it by is huge. Let me just get rid of that readout. And the problem with lifting it up that much is we see artifacts of noise, and we see degradation of the image, unfortunately, and especially into here. So my temptation with this shot would be, I think this has been pushed too far. And I get the desire to sort of lift it up a little bit, but we can probably do it in a slightly different way. So I'm not going to create all the layers all over again. I'm just going to demo what we can do slightly differently. So number one, yes, we do have a pretty compressed histogram. If we do want to lift it, it's not a problem. Use your levels tool and lift it. But you notice in here, we're already starting to see these effects. So if I go into undo there and redo, it's more obvious because we're lifting up the light. But the problem is I do want to lift it up for the sake of the rest of the image. So what we can do instead, we did it earlier, we've got this in shadow already, right? So why don't we just put a little bit of a darkening here, because we don't want to be forcing people to look at the shadows and the cars and the roads down here. We want people to look up here into the hills and the mountains. So I can lift the entire image with levels, my image layer, but then darken this bit back down so it's not quite so obvious. It's not screaming for my attention. Now, I said about trying to bring focus into these mountains. Number one, let's just try a deep sky. Not bad, right? So let me just go into my mask so I can see it. And I'm going to be very, very, very rough with the mask on deep sky. I don't want to affect that mountain on the right, but I do want to affect the whole sky. How do I make sure I do that? Well, I'm going to go to refine mask, do it to its maximum. And you see what's happened. I've switched to a grayscale mask, Option M or Alt M, or up here, display grayscale mask, and I can see what's happening, because now I can go into my eraser, nice big one, pull out this mountain. So I don't want any of that. Thank you very much. And I don't want any of this. And then I'm going to refine it again. Maybe not so much, maybe to there, apply. So now I have a pretty strong background. I'll turn that off and on. Probably too strong, actually, so I'm just going to back that away a little bit. And this is looking okay. Now, go back to my image layer. I can pull up contrast. That's looking pretty good. I can pull up a bit of clarity. And I can pull up a little bit of dehaze. But in every single time that I'm doing something like that, I'm keeping an eye on this corner, because I might want to counter all of that by hiding it a bit more. And that's the game we're sort of playing. We do have quite a lot of dust spots on here. Good news. Under your lens profile or lens section, you have a dust spot tool. If you don't have it, because you've played with your workspace like I have, add tool, dust removal. Down here, remove dust. Click that button. Ooh. It didn't do it very well, did it? That's unusual. Normally it does a better job. Interesting. So the bad news, unfortunately, Ken, is this is going to be a manual dust spot removal that I am not going to be doing massively for you, but we'll just get it started. I can send you the file after so you can finish it, but you'll get the idea. I don't know actually why that dust removal didn't work on this one. Maybe it's a weird lens or camera combo that Capture One struggles with. Don't know. But normally it does a better job than that. It doesn't take too long to fix it, and the results are pretty instant when you do. But Let's just do a quick one there. Quick one there. There. The point being, with those little changes, now if we want to bring up saturation a little bit, I'm not against it, but I would do it in moderation. So let's pull up saturation a touch. What I would be doing is maybe lifting up a bit of warmth and a touch of tint to maybe there. That crop that I think you already had, let's go to a 2x3 and just pull that in there. So this is the one that I think is too far. This is the way. This is where I would probably get to, that being the original. So to me, that change from there to there is perfectly acceptable. It's a decent way of lifting the image. This one here, I think it's a push too far. And the problem is that even if it was the effect that you wanted, the result of lifting all of this stuff up, and noise correction isn't going to fix this. It's just not going to get there. By using a bit of clever gradienting, you can sort of hide some of this stuff, but I wouldn't be pushing it too far. The other thing you can play with, of course, on this, on top of that, would be to load in something like, in fact, if we've got a vivacity, we could use different styles on top of that, and I can reduce their opacity. So, we get different effects that lift maybe some of this in here. This cloud has probably popped a little bit too much. That might be due to deep sky. So I'm just going to go back to, in fact, we'll do it on the deep sky layer. Yeah, the whites is too much. So I'm just going to pull that back so we don't push that cloud out to overexposed. But that's where I'd finish it. I wouldn't get to quite there for the same reasons. And it just feels a bit more natural, I think, compared to what you shot. So that's it for today. We've got loads more to go through still. We've got to get back together. Next week, we will start with Gary's shot here. And I can tell you we're going to start with some colouring. Bob's shot here of the driftwood. Just remember what you're trying to separate. Don't try and merge things together if you want things to stand out. So think about what's lighter, what's darker. And if you want them to stand out more, you need to separate them more, not combine them. Simon's shot here of this tree. Yes, you can remove the cables in Capture One, but if you've got anything better to do with your life than that for an afternoon, I'd switch it to a pixel editor. You've now seen how. Jed's shot here, this is all about the Keystone. The shot itself is nice. It's done well. The exposure's spot on. It's the most you can get out of the dynamic range of that camera, but it's just moving that Keystone and maybe adding a bit of style with some of the color grading. Paul, we'd covered this one. So yes, your Pano tool now does allow you, in fact, to paint outside of the area, but just use that with caution. Maybe rely on a pixel editor for certain things. And then finally, match that we started with. So that's it for today. We will see you. This is unusual, isn't it? Saw you last week, see you this week, we'll see you next week. Same time, same place, next Tuesday. We'll have some serious answers in a week's time from how the firework display went. And we won't chat about that either. Right. In the meantime, if you want to upload pictures, do it there. If you want to discuss stuff, do it there. And if you want to learn stuff, do it there. You'll find all the links down below. We'll see you in a week. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.